Well, Brandi and I are back again. Isn't this so good? Two podcasts back to back, comparing to the months where we focused on streaming and stuff. But it's been fun, and we definitely wanted to do these two back to back. So we just
Yeah.
talked about the Silent Hill original game, which Brandi was blind to, and it was so much fun to play that with her for the first time because I'm more familiar with it, and I love the world of Silent Hill.
Yeah.
And like replaying that and other things, kind of I'm like really in it now. So
Yeah, so if you
so
haven't watched that one, go watch that podcast first because
yes.
that gives more. That's all about the game, obviously.
The game, yes. And Brandi was blind to it. I was not, but not super familiar, I suppose.
Yeah.
As much as
Not like
Resident Evil, as
Resident
I
Evil.
said.
Yeah.
Yeah. But today, in this podcast, we're going to be talking about the Silent Hill 2006 movie adaptation, which, as I said, I think in the other one, is a little controversial. Some people love it, some people hate it. I feel like I'm in the middle, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
explain more of that later. Brandi was blind to this, just like the game. But I said, especially because we couldn't immediately jump into Silent Hill 2, and that's a whole other conversation we had in the last podcast. I still was like, oh, I really want to. Is there something else we can do? And I wanted the movie was available and we could watch it. And I told her that as long as she beat the first game, she's fine to watch the movie. There's no spoilers from anything else. They take creatures and things from the other movies, but creatures that she already knew about from the games, and just
Yeah, and there's
repurpose them
no
for this movie.
explaining. Yeah, there was no like delving into like the other games like story,
Yeah,
which is good because I
but
would
like
not have
this
wanted.
movie, yeah, this movie generally is regarded as a pretty decent adaptation, and I've heard a lot of people say it's regarded generally, at least for a while it was. I don't know if some newer movies have sort of superseded it, but generally speaking, it's regarded as like the best video game movie. And I think
Yes.
from a lot of
Interesting.
aspects that's true. Brandy and I,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure in this podcast, Brandy and I, as we always compare things to Resident Evil, we'll be probably talking a little bit about the movies because we love the game so much. I love the Silent
Yes.
Hill games as well. Um, but I guess first, background for me because I grew up with this movie as I grew up with the games as well. I have nostalgia towards this movie and I like it a lot. Well, okay, let me preface this by saying I guess my opinion on it has slowly evolved as I've, gotten more into things and
Yeah.
understanding the game story deeper. I think my favorite thing about this movie is the atmosphere, from the way it's
Yeah.
shot
Mm-hmm.
to like the visuals to the music, which we talked about in the last podcast for the first game, is
Yes.
incredible. The fact that this movie is composed entirely of music from the games and maybe
I love
retweaked
that.
scores by Akira Yamaoka, yeah,
Yeah.
who is the composer of almost all the games, except for one song by Johnny Cash. Ring of Fire is the only one in it.
Yes, and I love that too. Shout out Johnny Cash. Woo woo.
Which
That
I
is
said
cool. It
when we
fits
were.
though somehow. Like I
It
don't know.
does. It
Yeah.
does. It does because I think I said that when we were watching it, and I didn't want to explain it, but it kind of does. I mean, I don't really know the lyrics per se, the whole song, but just
Right.
thinking Ring of Fire and Alessa was burned alive and things like that, and
Oh yeah, and it burn. He says in the song, and it burn. I mean, obviously he's talking of a metaphor of like being in love, but like
right.
obviously in the context of the movie, that does. I didn't even think about that. Obviously, that does make sense. Because as the movie went on and I got more into the story, I kind of forgot that song was even used. But now that you mention it,
Right.
and I'm thinking of the whole context of the movie, that is very interesting.
I have nostalgia toward this movie. I love the way it's shot. I always say that, this movie, for the most part, gives me this almost the same feeling as playing the games because of the music, because of the
Mm.
way it's shot, because the town is incredibly well realized.
Yeah, definitely. That was one thing immediately I liked about it too. Like, and again, I'm coming from a perspective. So people have to sort of, if they stumble on this and they watch this and they're a Silent Hill fan, have to sort of remember that my perspective is going to be different than Dylan's, and then different than like an average like huge Silent Hill fan because
Right.
I've only played the first game. Didn't grow up with the games like I did with Resident Evil, which sucks, and I wish I did because then I'd own them all and it'd be easier and the first game was so good that I wish I had played it at a younger age, but regardless, I have to sort of bide my time and see if I can get the other games eventually. But so me going into this movie, I only had to compare it to the first, and I know it's based on the first game anyway, so I'm sure a lot of
Hmm.
fans compare it to the first game anyway. But for me, the opening was really strong. Like I've seen a couple video game movies. Obviously, the main one being Resident Evil, which any Resident Evil fan knows, not not great Resident Evil movies. But
No.
the live action movies, obviously, we're talking about with Mila Jovovich and Paul W. S.
Mm.
Anderson. But so and Dylan had told me, again, he did not spoil anything, but he had told me, like, he was curious to see my opinion because, like you said earlier too, Dylan, like, some fans either love this, hate it, and you said you kind of fall in the middle, and you were
Right.
curious to see what my thoughts would be on it because you said it is different than the Resident Evil movies, where it is a little, at least more faithful than those movies are to the
Yeah.
source material. And I
Hmm.
saw that immediately at least when the movie opened up with like the fog and like when she first goes into Silent Hill. I mean, the whole opening was great too, you know, when you just had to establish the characters and everything.
Yeah.
And then but once they actually get into Silent Hill and she crashes the car or whatever and loses, I think her daughter's name's, it's not Cheryl in that, right? It's close though.
Sharon. It's Sharon. Yeah.
Sharon, yeah, which is
That was
a
weird
weird
change that
choice.
we can get into when we talk about the bigger change to the main character. But
Yeah, I think
yeah.
we should start with like the positives, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
Just because I think like I really, really, really did like the way this was shot. It was shot like, and you said it was a high budget,
It was.
which is I think at least to my knowledge rare for like a video game movie. I could be
Hmm.
wrong, but I always think
Maybe
they're
they
made
just
by smaller
realized that.
studios, but
And maybe they just realized that they needed a bigger budget to
to pull off
effectively
some of this
portray
stuff.
this world, which I think in that sense they definitely did pull that off. The world of Silent Hill.
Yeah. No, definitely the whole opening when she first gets there is very strong, and that feeling like again in a movie it's hard. I've heard people, and you and I were kind of, and again we're always going to circle back to Resident Evil. In this case, I feel like it's appropriate anyway, considering we're talking about survival horror and everything. But we did talk about this while we were watching the movie, and I think it's worth mentioning here that like some people argue that the reason why Resident Evil never got a proper adaptation from like the first game, like you and I said we would love to see like a high budget like replication of like the mansion, that incident,
Yeah.
that'd be awesome. I think that could be really well done, but I've heard like arguments to that, and you said you've heard the same arguments. It's like, well, how would they make a movie on the mansion incident when you're just walking around the whole time solving puzzles and everything? And that I always thought that argument was so stupid because there's ways, and this movie proved that you can do that and
Hmm.
effectively while it doesn't get boring and you're not just sitting there watching them do because like you could get them to each story like in the mansion incident you could have Jill maybe or Chris, whoever would be the main character. I would like to see Jill, obviously she's my girl, but like just say Jill is walking up to a door and it's locked or whatever and she's kind of walking, but then she could run into Barry and have conversations with him, then she could go find Richard, they could hit each story element
Right.
so that it's filled with dialogue still, but then you still, I think this movie did the Silent Hill movie did it so good because in the beginning she is literally just walking around by herself, and the pacing of this movie, at least in the very beginning, was so well done. It was like
Hmm.
some, maybe by some people's standards it would be too slow, but I love that because it's how the game was too. Like you're just creeping around, like she's just walking
You're just
around.
like slowly pulled into the world.
Yes, and I love that, and I love that it didn't immediately jump into like a I mean obviously this movie wasn't about jump scares or anything, but there she was just walking through just like you would in the games, in the fog, and then she gets to like the dead end, which was really cool to see that like done in the movie, how like the
The
road is
road
just
is like
broken off and
collapsed.
it's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's so cool. So I think you can make a game or a movie from a game, even if you're just quote unquote walking around solving puzzles at first, because they did it in this, and then she obviously meets Sybil, so there's dialogue and conversation there. But then
Mm.
she ends up getting away from Sybil, and she goes off by herself, and like even though she's with Sybil too, a lot more than I think you are in the game, like that's kind of like her partner character for a little bit.
Hmm.
I think like you even said it too, like the feeling of isolation is still there and done so well because of like the fog and the way it's shot. Like you still feel like this is creepy. You still feel like even when she's with Sybil and there's two people in the scene, you just feel like holy shit,
Yeah.
they're like alone and this is scary. Like you don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I think for
I
the
keep saying
argument.
her. I guess I should say Rose. When we should probably talk about the
Yeah.
change in
Yeah. We
main
can talk.
character, which we'll talk about later. But
Yeah. But as far as like adapting a video game, I think, and I said to this, and so I told you this when we were watching it. As far as like going place to place and like meeting the story beats, I feel like it works in this the same way it could work in Resident Evil, where they go here and they get to this beat, and then like the mystery of what is this place continues to grow, which I
right.
feel like would work really well for a movie, and it works for the most part in this.
Yes.
I think I wanted to talk before we talk about the changes, which I do want to talk about. I wanted to talk about the like at least the first hour or so was very close to the game, and like the
Yeah.
beat by beat where Rose slash Harry is going. The car
Mhm.
crash is the same way. You know, the change. I'll quickly talk about this change because it's right at the beginning. I prefer the game's logic of Harry and Cheryl are just going to this normal resort town. They think it's just a
Yeah.
normal place, and then they get pulled into it because of Alessa, because of Cheryl's connection. Whereas in this, it's more I think one problem with this movie is they knew the game's plot was complex, so they wanted to
Yeah.
simplify it. And I said this to you, I think that their efforts to simplify it made things more complicated in like a
Right.
different way.
Yeah.
So in the movie, it's, you know, Sharon sleepwalks, and then Rose and her husband, who we'll talk about him too and why he's in this movie,
Hmm.
like she's by an edge of a cliff, and then they catch her, and then she's like yelling Silent Hill, and that's why they go there, because it's like, I think I much prefer the simpler thing of this. They just think they're going to a normal town, but they're not, because they're pulled into it for a
Yeah,
reason.
isn't in this movie too like it's like a just like an abandoned
Oh yeah,
like
yeah, it is
town that you're not supposed
abandoned.
to. Yeah.
Where again, which I think is cliche, and I much prefer the games again.
Right.
For the third time I say it, but that it's just a normal town to most people, which I think is
Right.
creepier than just the cliche. Oh, it's an abandoned town, and this movie
That's
has an
true.
explanation for why it's abandoned, but that change is also weird. But anyways,
Right.
what I was gonna say is the beat by beat moments where they get to the town, car crash, Sharon slash Cheryl's gone.
Mm.
She goes, I'm trying to remember, but eventually she does find. Oh yeah, yeah. She goes down that alleyway that, like, I think you noticed it too when we were watching it. That looks identical to the games, like with all the garages.
Oh yeah, that was so cool. Everything did look very close, at least at that point, to the game, and I loved that.
Yeah,
Like
and I love the
I remember
camera work.
commenting on that. Yeah, the camera
Yeah,
was great too.
there was one shot, and I told you that when we first played the game that when
Oh yeah,
Harry is first following
yeah.
her, it's like a weird overhead camera angle that kind of swings and does something really unique and creative.
Yeah, that's so
And the
cool that they
movie
did that.
recreates that pretty perfectly, which I like that.
Yeah, that's a lot of
Um,
attention to detail. Like I said, whoever made this movie definitely was a fan
right,
of the game, and that reflects in a lot of like, especially those early bits with the atmosphere and the
right.
camera angles and everything like that.
Just like the game, Rose slash Harry gets to they the oh yeah, the siren goes off, and then the darkness. So
Oh
they
yeah,
go
that's
from the fog
Siren.
world to the other world, and then those gray children start attacking you.
Oh yeah, they're so creepy, and there's like a bunch of them. We were like, damn, if there were
I
that many, we wouldn't have
remember,
survived the game.
I know there was so fucking many,
I
and
know.
in the game, like if there's two or three, it's fucking annoying. But
I know.
I remember before we watched the movie, you said something about like you were curious how they'd handle the creatures, because one thing we say about the Resident Evil movies is that usually the creatures are handled pretty well.
Yeah.
And then I think that the gray children were also done really well as well.
No, they were really. I mean, they looked like they do in the games. I think the only thing that was a little different is they had like some type of glowing like thing on them. I don't know. Was that in the game? I can't remember, but
No,
I
they
think
like kind of in the movie they kind of disintegrated like they were
yeah, they
burning,
disintegrated.
which
Yeah, yeah,
works
yeah.
with the plot of the story, I guess. They added that.
Right. And they looked like how I would imagine like the live act like they were done very very well and they were super creepy and then when they just like all bombard her at one point I was like, "Oh my God."
And then it's the same thing where, in the game you die or whatever, and then Harry wakes up in the diner. In this, Rose wakes up in, I think it's a bowling alley, which is a nod
Oh
to
yeah.
another game in the series.
Oh, that's cool.
I like, again, the beginning of the movie is pretty consistent with what happens at the beginning of the game. She finds the picture of Sharon's drawing, to tell her to go to the school, and all that's the same. And I think when you first said,
Oh yeah, that's
when we
cool.
were watching it, I think when you first said, like, oh, how cool it would be if we saw the mansion in live action, it's because when she was in Midwich, that looked pretty identical to the game.
Oh my God, it did. There was that point where she walked into, I mean, even the hallways and when she first entered it looked the same, but then specifically when she went into one of the classrooms, it looked exactly the way it does in the game, where like you walk in through one door and if you walk all the way down, there's like another door to leave, and like all the like the
Hmm.
way it just looked so like it's cool that they were able to capture the exact atmosphere from the game, like because I've never seen that done before. Because the only real basis of comparison I have for a like horror video game adaptation is the Resident Evil movie. So it's like, oh, well that's, this was at least in the beginning of this movie, it's I would say like one of the yeah, I would say it's one of like the best that I've seen. Again, I don't have a whole lot to compare to. I've heard of like the Mortal Kombat movie being absolute dog shit. And I'm a fan of Mortal Kombat, at least the older games, but I never saw the movie. Apparently it's terrible. There's like been Mario movies made that are really bad. I know Tomb Raider, at least the older ones with Angelina Jolie were, I mean, I think at the time they were okay and people went to see them and liked them, but I think as times went on, people are like, yeah, they're not that great they're not great adaptations either. So I think like the fact that they were able to fully capture like places from the game that like accurately is rare
Mhm.
and awesome that they were able to do that.
Yeah, no, I really like that part of it. I think there was a couple things in the school that were weird. I think you noticed, and you were kind of confused by them. There was the gas masks dudes.
Oh yeah, which made sense later, but at first I was like, wait, what? That was one thing in the beginning that sort of not fully took me out of it. I was just like, oh well, they're changing something clearly, but I was like, I liked the feeling of complete isolation in the game, where like you had only run into Sybil at that point, and everything else was like a creature and like scary, and like these guys came in with gas masks, which reminded me more of like a Resident Evil thing than like a
Right.
Silent Hill thing. So I was kind of confused by that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, those
it
things are
made sense later,
entirely
obviously.
yeah, those things are entirely made for this movie, which I don't know, they're also part of the changes that I don't like, and I guess when I say that, I mean, I think with this movie I've had like a slow evolution of like, okay, yeah, I don't really like that. I feel like 5 years ago, like I'm aware of the changes to the games, but they didn't bother me too much. But the more I age and get older, and the more I watch this movie, the changes do start to bother me more, just because of how good the game story and character is for them to make
Right.
the unnecessary changes that they did, kind of undercut the whole thing. There was the gas mask dudes. They did have what I did like, and I thought maybe this was a nod to the first game. Then they had like a bird cage. There was a bird flying around in it. I don't know if you remember that
Oh, wait, in the movie?
in the movie. The gas mask dude
Oh,
had like a
yeah.
bird cage.
Yeah, because I remember you pointing that out, and then I don't think maybe I
It
initially
was
caught it, but when you said that, I was like, oh, and then it
right
reminded me obviously of the game when you find that bird cage and you
of the
hear,
game,
isn't it? We
and then
didn't talk about this, but isn't that so cool when you go in that room with the bird cage, you just hear wings flapping around, but there's like nothing in there. I
there's
heard it
nothing
every
in
time I
there.
went in.
Yeah,
That's creepy, good atmosphere. But anyway, that's a
yeah,
side
yeah.
note.
No, but that definitely connects. And then the bird had a different purpose in this that I actually kind of liked. I'm remembering when like the siren was going off in the movie,
Hmm.
they had like put down the bird cage, but then it showed the bird like freaking out inside the bird cage. So
Oh
maybe
yeah.
maybe they carried that bird around because the bird was kind of sensing things before they did, like about the world changing. I
Oh,
actually
that's
think that was kind
interesting.
of a clever way to use that.
Right, that is interesting, and it is obviously a nod in some ways to the game because of the
The bird cage.
cage
And
that you find the key in. Yeah, which is cool.
then I think Rose is in the bathroom, and then there's a creature that is I might be jumping ahead. I'm not sure, but there's that creature in the bathroom stalls. Do you remember that like dude?
Oh
And she
yeah,
pulls a
and
piece out of his mouth
yeah, and I remember, and then doesn't he end up coming to life and he's like contorted and
in the other
he's
world. Yeah,
yeah. Didn't I ask you? Because I remember you telling me again, you didn't spoil anything at all, but you said there are some creatures. Well, you already said that I think in the beginning of this podcast too that there are some creatures from other games that maybe I would either recognize or maybe not recognize. So I
right.
remember asking you if that was one from the games, and I think you said that was like one of the only ones that they made up for the movie, which was still good though
Yeah,
because it fit with from what I know of
right,
Silent Hill creatures and stuff. It was really creepy and it was all contorted and like its
right.
legs and stuff. Like it was like all bent weird. I was like, man, they had to have gotten a contortionist to do that, that
I
part.
know. Well, I don't think I told you this when we were watching it, but because he is made up for the movie, but he, like any other creature, has a reason and a symbolism for being there, which I
Oh
appreciate
wow, really?
the movie keeping that consistent. They cut some creatures like Pyramid Head. They put in this and give him a different explanation than in the games.
Which is good because I won't be spoiled as to why he's in
Yeah,
James's game because I have no idea why. No
I
spoilers,
don't.
people.
Yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, I didn't tell you this, and I'm curious how you feel about it. Do you remember in the games, in the first game, there's that bathroom and you hear like a girl crying in the stall?
Oh yeah, and I got freaked out because I thought something was gonna happen, but yeah,
And
no, I
that's
do remember.
supposed to be Alessa. And in the game, it's just supposed to symbolize like her classmates were bullying her, so maybe at one point she went in the bathroom and like hid and cried, which is
Oh
sad.
wow, that's interesting. Yeah.
But in the movie, and they kind of explain this at the end with the whole exposition stuff, which again changes stuff. In the movie, that guy, like Alessa, they showed Alessa running into the bathroom in the flashback, and he was supposed to be a janitor that they imply that he sexually abused her in that bathroom. So they made it.
Oh, I was. Wait. Are you talking about the movie?
The movie.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that, and I completely like either just it's like I remember
Hmm.
I'm jumping way ahead now, but
It's
this
fine. Yeah,
this
I
has to
brought
do.
it.
I remember when Alessa, or that's still her name in the movie, right? I don't know
Alessa.
why.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
still her
because
name.
everything's the same except obviously Harry and then Cheryl for whatever reason. But yeah, I remember
Hmm.
in the movie when Alessa's showing Rose like everything. It almost looks like an
Yeah.
old like film reel or whatever. It's like very foggy, but like
Hmm.
she's showing everything that she had went through and what was going on, and it was the whole plot of the whole story basically was like explained in that little. And I remember a guy being in the bathroom and her looking really scared, but I was like, wait, what did that have to do? Like, I was confused by that, and I don't know why I didn't
Right.
just outright ask you. I guess I either just forgot about that, but like, was that because I kind of thought that I'm like, is there are they showing like a which would be super interesting and again very like dark, which I think fits with the theme of Silent
Yeah.
Hill. If it was like a
Well,
sexual abuse storyline or whatever, is what I was thinking.
yes.
But I
That
also
is
didn't
what
want to
it.
like be wrong and be like, oh, am I thinking like a weirdo
No.
because I thought that, but.
No, that is what it implies. I think it was Dark Alessa that was telling that flashback, and she said something in that scene, something about, she said something like, and even the adults failed to protect her on that scene, implying that with him, like that the other
So
adults didn't protect her from him.
wait, so
And then there was also,
he was a
yeah,
janitor? Is that who he was?
yeah, he was like
Oh,
cleaning
okay,
the
at the
bathroom.
school. Okay.
And it's really sick and fucked up, but Silent Hill also, not so much in the first game, but some of the other games have a lot to do with like sexuality and sexual behavior and things like that.
Well, that's the only thing I kind of know about Pyramid Head. I have no idea what it has to
Hmm.
do with I almost said Harry, with James and like his story, but I know that I've seen like one kind of like awkward scene where like you're introduced to Pyramid Head in the game and he's like it looks like he's like fucking those like mannequin leg
Right, right.
monsters. So I
Hmm.
know a little bit about that. I don't know the context. So like
Yeah.
but I think that that's interesting to explore that in a horror game and make it because like again Silent Hill seems like such a dark, even the
Uh,
first game, such a
yeah.
dark like
And they like tackle
twisted
like
story
adult
anyway.
subject
Yeah,
matters that video games don't tend to. But no, there's
especially
just.
at that time. Again, I think for the
Mhm.
time, Silent Hill was always sort of ahead of itself with getting into like deep, like almost controversial type topics, but twisting
Right.
them in a way that fits like the horror aesthetic. It's very very interesting.
And I almost don't want to say this, but the movie implies it anyways. But the way that the creature, like, I don't know if you remember, but how like he did, his legs didn't work and he was like dragging himself, but how
Yes.
he also was like kind of like wagging his tongue a lot.
Oh yeah,
If
ew,
you
that's
kind of
creepy.
get what I'm like implying
No,
with
yeah,
the
that is
whole.
creepy. See, but it's creepy and it's disturbing and it makes you like and some people don't like that type of disturbing at all to the point where they
Right.
either get like really offended by it and that's fine or like just don't want to watch stuff like that. For me, it's
Hmm.
disturbing and creepy, but I think it's very interesting and I think that those things like should be talked
Those
about.
things happen. So.
Yeah, and it's just like we always again we always reference other things, but again going back to like Gage dying in Pet Cemetery and a lot of people getting offended by that, like it's unfortunate, but sometimes things like that happen where toddlers, kids
Mhm.
unfortunately die, whether it's a horrible accident or they get sick or whatever. And like so I think having a dark theme such as like sexual abuse being talked about, especially
Mhm.
in like a horror game or a horror story, like it's very it's just I don't
Right.
know. That's so interesting to me the way
Yeah.
that how deep Silent Hill can be and how like layered
Right.
it is. It's
That's
very
not.
interesting.
Yeah, that's not though. I don't know if I said it wrong, but that's not like from. That's not part of the game story. That's just something they made for the movie.
Oh no no I know. I
Yeah.
think
Okay.
from what I understand again of like Pyramid Head in the second game, he may have
Hmm.
something to do with something along
Right.
those lines, maybe. But again, I have no idea James's backstory. All I know is he's looking for his wife, and Pyramid Head is a freaky like weird dude, and like the
Yeah.
mannequin legs and stuff. So I think like you said in the games later on that might be like a
Mm.
subject. I know it wasn't in the games, but I still think the game, even the first game, had its own dark. I mean, we talked about like the child abuse from like
Yeah. Yeah.
Dahlia in the games and everything, or in the first game. So it still had its darkness. I think the movie
Yeah.
exploring like
Hmm.
an even darker level and adding that
Hmm.
story, which again I thought that's what it was, but I just was like, oh well, I don't really know if this if I'm seeing this correctly or if that's what they're implying. But like
Right.
it's
Yeah.
interesting
No.
that is. I think
That
that just adds
is.
more to like Alessa and her like trauma and stuff, which is
Hmm.
sad.
I think after the whole school, that's where I think that's where Rose and Sybil kind of meet up again, and that's from then on they're kind of with each other throughout most of the rest of the movie, and then that's when
Yeah.
they get further to some of the changes. So before we go to there,
Yeah.
I think I do want to talk about again we're still I guess on the good of the movie.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about Sybil because I think Sybil was
Yes.
really
Yeah.
well done and really well
I think
adapted.
she was like the best cast, at least. I mean, everybody was well
Hmm.
cast and a good actor in this, but I think she like really resembled, and like even like her acting, like personality wise, like she captured Sybil really, really
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, no, I think she was written well, and yes, she was portrayed pretty well by Laurie Holden, who I just have to throw this in there. She is one of my favorite actresses from other things and this, including, I loved her on The Walking Dead. She was my favorite character on that, and I stopped watching the show after she left the show. And then she was in The Mist, and I love The Mist, so she's one of my favorite
Yeah,
actresses. I've met her. She was very
that's
nice.
awesome.
She gave me a hug. She was very
Oh
nice.
yeah, wasn't she like for a while your Twitter, like your
Oh
picture? Because
yeah,
I think I
that
remember.
was my
Yeah,
picture for a little while. Yeah.
damn, she still looks really good. She still looks the same she did in those movies all those years ago.
Yeah.
No, she's really, really good though. She's like super talented, and she looked just like Sybil. I was like, what? Like
And
when she took the helmet
Sybil was
off.
written more or less how she is in the game too, so that helped.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Sybil was one of like it's interesting because I think in the game like the female characters for me were like the most like I loved I mean I like Harry too, don't get me wrong. I even said like Harry for whatever reason. I just really like him as a protagonist or as a play like
Hmm.
you play as him.
Yeah.
But I really obviously we talked a lot about Lisa in the game podcast, and then I don't know if we talked a whole lot about Sybil, but I really liked her too in the game. And then
Hmm.
I was like, when she was done really well in the movie, I'm like, oh, that's so awesome. Like Lori, her name's Lori Holden, right? I don't want to get names wrong. I
Laurie
hate
Holden, yeah.
yeah, I remember. Oh, remember. I guess I should admit this. Like when she first appeared, when she very
Oh,
first appeared, when they were at like a gas station before the mom Rose even drives to Silent Hill to
yeah.
stop at a gas station, which is a weird gas station that we figured out that it
We
was like a gas
noticed, yeah.
station plus food, like
There was a
plus
diner, and then we saw like tattoos and piercings.
I don't know if that's a real thing, but that's hilarious.
I'm
But
gonna go get some gas. I might as well get a new
let me
piercing,
stop and get a tattoo. So weird.
or
Um,
get a new tattoo while I'm eating my diner eggs.
my it is very that was confusing and weird. But
Yeah, that
anyway.
was weird.
But that was the first time you see Sybil. She like pulls up and she's kind of like looking like watching Rose kind of skeptically, like with her daughter. I think she like may like think that there's some
She's
like abuse or something.
concerned, and
Yeah.
I did like this. This was a backstory that was added to Sybil in the movie, and I actually like it a lot.
Hmm.
Um, I think she was concerned, and at first I was a little like, is Brandi gonna think she's like being a bitchy character, like written
It's funny.
incorrectly? Because Sharon was freaking out about her drawings, and that was creepy too. Because she had like a pretty
Right.
drawing about a lion, which
Oh, and then they were all
um,
dark and yeah.
yeah, they were all messed up. Oh, and that's something that I didn't mention in the game podcast,
Game.
but I guess it kind of applies to this too, because early in the movie, Sharon had drawn like a lion. Well, I don't know if you
Hmm.
remember in the game, very early on, we find those keys, and there was the lion, Scarecrow, and Tin Man. That was obviously a
Oh, that's
reference to the
awesome.
Wizard of Oz, and must
Yeah,
have
I
been
do kind
something
of
that
remember that
Alessa
now.
liked. And
Yeah,
it kind of was
that's
carried
cool.
over in the movie because she had the lion drawing. But no, Sybil was like concerned about that because one of the added characters in the movie says later, he's another cop with the father, said that Sybil found a missing child like in her past. She found him abandoned in a well, and he said that she stayed in that well for 3 days until they were like rescued, like just to
Oh,
make sure that the kid was okay. So
right.
that's why she was worried about, I guess it looked sketchy, and she was worried about the
Well,
child.
it's so funny. Well, and again, this is why we're besties, Dylan, because you know me so well. I mean, we've known each other, like I said, almost 10 years. So it's funny that you know me so well that you would have just assumed and like been a little worried that how I would have taken. But I didn't take it as that at all, which is just
Right.
proof that she is written well in the movie because immediately when because I think it's cool that she is exactly like Sybil from the games, except she is a little more feisty. But that worked for her because of especially that backstory they created. But also when she was getting a little feisty or whatever you want to say with Rose, I understood it because it did look a little suspicious, even though Rose was innocent and did nothing wrong. Obviously, I
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
got where Sybil's point of view was coming from. Like she just was concerned about the little girl, and I liked that
Hmm.
about her. Like she was just being a good cop. So
Yeah.
I mean, all the way through the movie from beginning to end, I liked Sybil. I think the portrayal was really, really well done. But the whole reason I brought up the whole gas station scene to begin
Oh,
with is
right.
it's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
funny that I so because of the gender swap, which I know we're definitely gonna talk more about,
Yes.
because the reasoning behind why they did that is just so stupid to me. I don't mind at all, like, that. And Rose, like you said, you've said it a lot of times while we were watching it, she serves her purpose. She does
She's
like,
fine,
she's a
yeah.
good character. She's played well by the actress. We'll get into the whole hair. I won't get into that right now. So I thought because they switched Harry's gender to a female, that maybe some of the other characters would switch their gender
Right.
just to have that sort of female male companion dynamic. I don't know, that happens a lot
Hmm.
in movies. So I was like thinking in my head, oh, is Sybil gonna be like a male? And obviously you didn't tell me
Right.
anything, so I was just like, so. And I feel so bad because Laurie Holden is so beautiful and she's so feminine looking, like in her face, like she's so pretty. But I feel so bad. But like when she first pulled up, and of course she's in all her gear, in her, like,
Right.
and she's on the motorcycle and she has
She has
sunglasses
her
and a
helmet
helmet on.
on.
Yeah, so this will justify it a little more, I hope. But like I thought at first, I was like, oh, is that supposed to be Sybil? Is that like the man? I don't know if I said it out loud, but I was just like thinking in my head, oh, they did do like a male, like that's gonna be the equivalent of Sybil, but it's a male. And then of
Hmm.
course, as soon as she got off the motorcycle and started walking up towards the car, I was like immediately, like, I saw boobs. I was like, oh. And I just saw like her little figure and everything. And then obviously when she takes the sunglasses off later, and Laurie Holden has a very, like I said, feminine, pretty, like,
Hmm.
face, which I talked a lot about, my opinion on all that in the Silent Hill, because I talked a lot about Lisa, who is awesome, but that's all in that
Hmm.
podcast. So if you listen to that, you already know that, I
Yeah.
dig feminine, pretty female characters. I don't know if that makes me sound weird or shallow or whatever, but that's just like, so like once she took her sunglasses off and I was like, oh yeah, and then I had known her from The Mist, because you had shown me that movie
Hmm.
too, which I loved that movie.
Which we
I've
reviewed
never
before
watched The
too
Walking Dead. Yeah,
on
and
the
that
podcast.
movie's awesome. And it's cool that like she has a connection to like a Stephen King thing, and she was in a
Hmm.
Silent Hill movie which has a lot of connection to Stephen King. It's just, the whole thing is
Yeah.
very interesting. But yeah, no, so I just wanted to tell that, because like I did think that they were gonna kind of gender swap Sybil as well, and I really did think that until, but I like that I really liked the whole dynamic between Rose and Sybil in the movie too, because they were just like these, like, eventually, like, obviously Sybil's a little, I don't know if the word's like hostile towards Rose at first. She wants to
At the
arrest her
beginning,
initially.
yeah.
Yeah, which makes sense, because again, she thinks she's endangering her daughter and everything. And then once Sybil finds out this place is all fucked up and she's seeing shit too, and they start working together, I actually really, really like them as a team. Even though I would have preferred to see Harry, just because I would have just wanted to
Yeah.
see how he translated on screen. I still think they're a really good duo, like Rose and Sybil.
Yeah. No, they work well together. I just want to say there was another couple things that I really did like near the beginning. I really loved the way they incorporated, because it's like a game mechanic, but they still incorporated it seamlessly into this. When she, when she found the picture that said school, and she ran around, she kept running to the different map posts around the town, and it like fought to follow the right path to get to the
Yeah, and
school, and all the
yeah.
names were the same as the game, like Bachman Road and all that.
Oh, I know, when I saw that I was really hyped. And I just like that little, it's like a little nod to like the fact that anybody that's played Silent Hill, I'm sure, is checking the map constantly. That's what I was doing, because the map's very
Hmm.
helpful, and when you're in a misty, running through the mist, it's hard to figure out where to go. So like I was constantly pulling up the map, and I just love that little nod to like, she's looking at a map that kind of looks a little similar to the one in the games, although it's not as detailed or whatever. But it is really cool to see like her checking a map to get to where she needs to go, and then seeing all the roads that
I
are
know.
the
It's just
same.
such a very survival horror thing, and again, just the way
I
they
know.
incorporated a game mechanic,
Into a movie,
effortlessly.
yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So I really did enjoy that. And then I guess if you wanted to go through the characters.
The ones from the games that we could talk about, and then obviously we'd have to talk about some of the added one, a little bit of the added ones, but I think that
Yeah.
starting with the game ones would be fine. We did talk about Sybil. She's
Yeah.
awesome. Laurie Holden, great, great, great job.
Well, I guess then it gets more into like some changes and things like that. I guess the next character that's adapted pretty well is uh, not flawlessly, but Sharon slash Cheryl and
Oh
Alessa.
yeah, no, I like her because I like that actress anyway. For anybody that doesn't know, I knew her from Carrie, which is the
Yes.
2002 remake. Which
Hmm.
again, another Stephen King connection. Very, it's
I
like
know.
so weird and funny. It's like an
It's
enigma that
really
I.
funny that she played young Carrie and Alessa, considering Alessa is such an influence, like so influenced by Carrie, and
Yeah,
she played
it's
both of them.
that's so funny. I wonder if that was like a conscious thing or just a huge coincidence. But no, she's a great little, like, kid actress anyway. Like I always liked her. She's only in the 2002 Carrie, like in one scene. It's like a
Mm.
flashback of Carrie's childhood, but I always thought she was really well done in that, and she's super cute. I said this to you when I was watching Carrie, the 2002 Carrie last time. I was like, she would make a good Natalia. Also, of course, bringing
Oh
Resident Evil
yeah.
back to the forefront. She's got the long dark hair. She's got a really cute face. She's really, and she's a really good
Yeah.
actress. And I had never seen her like because in the one scene she's in Carrie, she's mainly just talking to somebody, like it's mainly dialogue, which she does
Hmm.
great in anyway. And then like Margaret comes out and pulls her back into the house and she cries a little bit. But I think in this movie to see like her range and like some of the screaming and some of the stuff she had to do, I'm like, wow, she's really really good. And she seemed, I don't know how old she was in this, but she had to have been like what, like maybe like 10, 11 at the oldest maybe. She looked really young to
Probably,
me.
yeah.
So I think she was portrayed well.
I think she portrayed definitely the innocence that is, Sharon slash Cheryl very well. And then
The
like
evil of
this
Alessa.
of Alessa. Again, I said in the game review that I don't see Alessa really as evil
Right.
in the first game, whereas they kind of took that away from her and made her maybe a little sinister, at least dark Alessa
I think
in the
she's more
movie.
vengeful, yeah, because I guess because
Yeah.
she's also, they obviously changed her story, which we'll get into, and I think because of that they made her like more of a vengeful spirit, like maybe like a Samara or something from The Ring.
Right.
But I think it worked for the story of the movie. But I agree with you that I prefer her because I didn't see her as that in the games either. Like I saw her as like somebody you sympathize for because of how like horrible Dahlia was to her in the games.
Hmm.
So I think, and it was almost like Dahlia was forcing her to use her powers for bad, and she really actually just wanted to be just a normal person, kind of like
Yeah.
Carrie. Again, it goes back to like the Carrie
Hmm.
references, but in this it's obviously different. But I think for what it was, like the actress, again, I don't know names, I'm terrible, I'm sorry, but she was really good. She even looked
She's
creepy, which oh, do you know her
J-
name?
Jodelle Ferland. I have
Yeah,
my
she's good.
Blu-ray. I can see their names on it.
Wonder if she still does any acting. I'll have to look into it. I'm sure she does, but she was really good, and she did actually look really creepy too at certain points when Rose would see her, and like she would be facing away from the camera. And I think again this movie came out in 2006, I believe, right?
6.
So yeah, this was after the hype of The Ring, and I always complain about this, but I think it still worked in this movie, and I'll explain why. But like, it's funny that after The Ring came out and The Grudge, I think they came out relatively around the same time. It was like a big thing to put like little pale girls with long dark hair in horror movies. It was kind of like a trope at one point, I feel like, because a lot of movies
Mm.
that like when they remade Amityville Horror, they did the same thing, which was so stupid. But we talked about that before, so I digress. But I think because in this movie it gave me sort of Samara vibes a little bit every time Rose came
Hmm.
across Alessa. She had like the tangled black hair and she was facing away, and then like she would like Rose would put her hand on her shoulder and be like, "Are you okay?" And she would turn around and but it worked because like she looked, I don't know, the look of her too, like she was pale and she had the long dark hair or whatever, but she was also like talking, like she wasn't just like a ghost that came out and like like the Grudge or the Ring and just killed. She was like talking to Rose because Rose was like,
Hmm.
"Oh, you're my daughter," or whatever, or you looked, or she said at one point like you could be her twin, and then I forget what Alessa said, probably some shit about like, I don't think she told her she was her or part of her yet, but like because that was in the beginning. But like I don't know, I still think it worked, even
Hmm.
though I think that whole long tangled black dark hair thing comes from like the Ring a lot of the time.
Right.
It worked for this context. I mean, and didn't Alessa, she has black hair in the game anyway, so.
Who I'd want to talk about next because I feel like I want to talk about Dahlia and Rose back to back. I guess we can talk about Chris, who was Rose's husband.
Oh yeah.
And I want to talk about him for a couple of reasons. One, because when we realized it, we were watching it and we were like, he could just be Harry. Why wasn't he just cast as Harry? He could have been Harry. And then like looks wise and everything. And then
Yeah, no, I thought that once you said that, and I was thinking that already, but once you said it and kind of agreed, I was like, oh, that I'm not wrong because you're a bigger Silent Hill fan than I am, so I think he definitely could have been
yeah. And then very
Harry, and that would have been
quickly
cool.
on the other character that he interacts with a lot, Officer
Oh yeah.
Gucky or Gucci or whatever.
Oh Gucci, yeah.
Couple things on him.
Gucci.
I do think it's cool that they took. I told you there's a file in the game, in the first game, the police station. You can find it. It talks about Officer Thomas Gucci, whatever.
Oh, in the game, right?
In the
Yeah.
game, he's only mentioned in a file, and then they made him a character in the movie, which is interesting.
Right. No, I agree with that. That's like, when you said like there's references of like Outbreak in or like files of stuff in Outbreak that are in like later games or stuff in Resident Evil. Like I know that
Right.
they do that
Yeah.
sometimes so that's kind of cool that they did that.
Yeah. But I have a couple things on him. again, saying like Sean Bean, who played Chris, who he could have been
Oh
Harry, it
yeah.
would have been fine. And then
He's a really good actor too. He's known for a lot of stuff. I'm surprised he wasn't like the main
I
guy
know.
in this.
Well, and then the actor that played Officer Gucky, I don't know.
Oh yeah,
Um,
remember what we figured out he was from, and that's why I laughed when you
yeah.
mentioned.
Well, I wanted to say that, but I also wanted to say I said to you, and I've always thought this. He's like the spitting image, at least in cutscenes, of like Dr. Kaufman from the game. And
Yes,
it's like
I was.
he could have been that, but they didn't even include Dr. Kaufman, which I get kind of because the whole drug subplot I guess isn't necessary because it is optional. But
I know, and they downplayed my girl Lisa, which we'll talk about, which I didn't. That
mm,
was that's one of my negatives that we will definitely talk about. But no, I
yeah,
thought the same. You know what's funny? It's literally like, yeah, those two look like Harry and Dr. Kaufman so well. Was that like again a conscious thing or just a huge coincidence? And maybe are we the only ones that see that? Because I saw that
I don't know.
100% between the both of them.
I don't know. I really don't. It's just like they could have cast them as those characters and it would have been fine. But
I
and I
know
would
it
have
would have been
liked to have
awesome.
seen the beginning of this movie is mostly faithful to the games, but then there's
Yeah,
changes like that, and it's just like, man, I really wish you had done that, and not
right,
change that for
right.
seemingly no reason.
No, I can 100% agree with that. After playing the first game now, I can have an opinion on that, and I agree. I think that those two, they even have like a because they're together for most of the movie for for the dad's scenes.
Yeah,
What's his name again? His character name? The dad?
Christopher.
Christopher, yeah. Like he's with him a lot. They even have like a sort of dynamic and chemistry in their acting that they could have so been Kaufman and Harry. That would have been really, really cool
I
to
know.
see that
There,
portrayed.
before we move on from them, I know we wanted to mention. I mentioned where we know that his name Kim Coates, I
Oh,
think, who
that's
played
so funny.
Dr. Gucky, I said, do you know where we know him from? Do you want to?
Yeah, I remember at first, well, because it was they were in like the car together, him and Christopher, and it was on Christopher's the dad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was on the camera was on Christopher, and then it jumped over to Gucci or whatever his name was
Yeah.
for a second. But like I had said, where do I know him from? And I was talking about Christopher because of course Sean Bean is his name. I mean, even his
Hmm.
name I feel like people know. He's from so many things, but I like was trying to put my finger on exactly what I knew him from. So I said, where do I know him from? And then you started laughing. You're like, were you talking about him? And I was like, no, wait, why should I know him? And you were like, oh. And then once you said it and started to explain it, I started laughing because I saw it in my head. But I don't know his name in it, so I don't know if you want to say it, but he's in Resident Evil
His the
Afterlife.
character's name in the movie. I don't remember his character's name.
No, oh, in Afterlife, yeah, yeah. You don't know it, I don't know it either. But he's like, isn't he like
He's like a
bros with Wesker or something?
yeah in Resident Evil Afterlife. He's like a movie producer or something who kind of
Yeah.
fucks everyone over and then goes with Wesker and then Wesker kills him and eats him or whatever.
Is that supposed to be a reference to Excella? Definitely not as cool
I
as
don't
Excella. But
know.
it's funny that he was in an adaptation of a Resident Evil movie as well as Silent Hill.
I know. One of the things I really did like on Chris, and then
Hmm.
when we get to Rose, I'll talk about why he's in this movie to begin with. But
Right.
there was some moments that I actually really did like. Do you remember when Rose was stuck in the other world? It was near the kind of beginning slash midway, and she like
Oh yeah.
collapses next to the lockers and is like crying. Meanwhile,
Yeah, yeah.
Officer Gucci and Christopher are also in Silent Hill looking for her, but they're in the real world. They're seeing it as most people do, even though in this it's
I love
abandoned.
that, yeah.
But
And he
the
can like smell her perfume or something,
yes,
which is
he said
so
he could
cool.
smell her perfume, and then I love when they cut back. They would cut to them next to the lockers and her next to the lockers, but they're like different realities. But he could still sense her in a sense, but they were literally right next to each other, but they didn't.
That's really cool, and I think that whole scene kind of helped me to understand even more. Because again, I maybe I'm just slow, but I would get confused a lot with like the different
Right.
worlds and things within Silent Hill. Like I was like, is
Yeah.
this real? Is it in their heads? And then when you explained it, but I think that scene was like really really cool because it
Yeah, I
showed
think I
like
did.
their different universes in a way, which is crazy.
Yeah, I think I did say that. I think I said the movie would help you understand the other world and the realities a little better because it simplifies it. And
Yeah.
being a 1999 PS1 survival horror game, the game does not lay it all out for you and explicitly state it. But there's ways of visually shooting it. That scene really, I think, helped. But I guess the first like big change that I don't like, and I used to not have a problem with it, but I guess maybe it's playing them and watching them back to back and just thinking
Hmm.
about it more. So moving on to Dahlia. I think
Oh yeah.
Dahlia is cast well in this movie.
Right. I know
I
her
do
actress. I
think
don't know her
that
name, but I know her from shit, and she's really good.
Deborah Kara Unger.
Yeah.
I like her, especially like they changed Dahlia's look considerably, but
Right.
later in the movie
She
again
still
when they
looked creepy though. I think she still looked pretty good
yeah,
and creepy.
but they show her in the flashbacks later when she's younger.
Oh yeah.
I don't know why. I think in that actress's face, maybe it's the way her face is like structured. I kind of see she has kind of that essence, I think, of Dahlia from the game. So I feel like she
Right.
could have played a good
Like dark. Yeah.
like video game, the correct adaptation of Dahlia. But no, they changed her and made her more of a sympathetic character, which
Yeah, I remember I
I
said that when we were watching it. I was like, that's weird.
that's a weird you're gonna make the character who in the game burns her daughter alive because she wants her to birth her fucking cult's god. Let's make her sympathetic. I just and as much as I like Dahlia in the games as well, I don't like that.
No, I agree. I think that was very jarring for me because I was like, wait, like are they, because at first you don't know that, like it got confusing for me at one point too, because you had basically, I thought there was going to be two cults in this, like cult type
Right,
religious things,
yeah.
because you keep seeing Dahlia, she's popping up, and she like similarly how she does in the game at first, and tells Rose all this cryptic weird shit. So I was just like, oh, it's Dahlia, okay, that makes sense. But then once she was like introduced, then you see this like other cult, and they say, "Oh, you're not welcome to Dahlia," and like this, you actually run into a girl at first. I don't remember her character's name. Do you remember the girl that you like run
Anna,
into? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And she's like hitting Dahlia, or like put, or like doing
she's like
something, and
throwing
like
rocks at her.
yeah, throwing, and like Rose and Sybil stop her, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Oh, she's not like." We're, and it was weird because
Right.
I was like, she's supposed to be like the leader in a sense in the games, at least I
Hmm.
gathered that. And then this girl's like, oh, she's not welcome and we don't like her. And then I was like, okay, well, who's like the villain here? So I was confused, and I guess they wanted to do like a complex mystery plot type thing with that, but I didn't. And then when they did the whole flashback and it made you feel like bad for Dahlia, I
Right,
was
for
like, that's
Dahlia.
weird.
It's very
Because
weird.
she's
And
really crazy and scary in the games, and they made
I
her.
know. And just the fact that they even doubled down on that because the cult that's in the movie, and I said this, has a character, I think her name's Christabella. She's more or less
Oh yeah, I
playing
like that
Dahlia's
name though.
role from the game. So it's
Yeah,
very weird to
yeah.
have both and not have her be Dahlia and have Dahlia be some kind of outcast. I don't know. I feel like either they didn't understand the cult from the game or they just wanted to do their own thing, which really made it
Right.
complicated. And even like the symbol was different for the cult from like they changed
Oh
it.
yeah, yeah. I remember. I was actually. That's another thing I was going to ask you about when we were watching it, and then for whatever reason I just stayed silent. And I was like, I think that is different than the one from the game, because I didn't remember that. I didn't
Yeah.
remember it looking like that in the game. But that is, yeah. If they were gonna do a female culty religious fanatic character anyway, why, and to be like the villain, why didn't they just go with it being Dahlia? I
I
don't know. I
think
really don't understand that change. Maybe they, again, like you said, just wanted to, like, for shock value fans that played the game to be super different, but I don't know.
I I don't know. The more I think about it, I think a lot of the problems with this movie, and again, I enjoy most of it considerably, but a lot of the problems I do have, I think, all kind of stem from them changing Harry to Rose. And
Right, that's
I
true.
guess I could explain that more by saying, like, they changed it from Harry to Rose for a stupid reason, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But then they had a mother, and then they had Dahlia, who's also Alessa's mother, so they wanted to say something about motherhood, which is great. They wanted to then, there's a line that Rose says about, like, mother is God in the eyes of a child or something. They wanted to have, like, oh, Rose is a mother, Dahlia's the mother. We got to sympathize towards both of them to different degrees. But I said to you,
Oh, so they
why
could relate or whatever. Okay.
but why, if they're going to do that, if they changed Rose or Harry to Rose and made it a mother, if they wanted to talk about motherhood, wouldn't it be more interesting to talk about, oh, Rose, she's a great mother. Dahlia, not so much.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
show two different sides.
Right.
If
Like,
they
no,
kept
that,
Dahlia as the character she should have been.
yeah, but I guess, like, maybe you're on to something in thinking that, like, maybe they wanted Rose to be able to, like, or Dahlia to, I don't know, it's weird, like, to relate to Rose, and like,
Hmm.
but I don't know why though, like, why, I still, I get so confused by that whole thing that I don't even like know how to comment on it, because it's like
Right.
I just don't get the change, and when what.
I don't either. Again, I say a lot of these changes in this movie are just unnecessary. There's no
Right.
reason to change Dahlia other than wanting to tell that kind of a story, which is fine, but it just takes so much away from the character of Dahlia. And then
Yeah, because she wasn't even in it like as much as like I feel like we saw Dahlia like a lot
she,
throughout the game, and she was I feel
yeah,
like before that flashback, I don't even remember seeing her a whole lot. Like you see her don't you see her before you see that girl throwing rocks at her? Like that's not the first time Rose bumps into her, right?
yeah. No, Rose bumps into her first, and then like shows her the locket with the picture of Sharon, like this is my daughter. Have you
Oh,
seen her? And then but
yeah.
Dahlia recognizes her as Alessa, and then
I do remember that, yeah. And then she fucks off for a little bit, and then I think the next scene you see her is when is her name Anna? Is that who you said her name is?
mm-hmm.
Like is throwing the shit at her. But then and then on the steps of that, I think the other problem. I don't know if we should go into the whole problem with the cult until we talk about Rose a little bit. But yeah, I'm gonna
Right.
save that. But I do think like I agree with you that it's sort of like I think Dahlia is a very well done horror villain in Silent
She's a
Hill
great villain.
in the game, yeah. So
So
to kind of change it, that would almost be like I don't know if this is blasphemous to compare, but it's almost like just making like Wesker like a sympathetic character in a Resident Evil movie. It would just be weird,
I
and you
know,
know.
just to make
Or
to
like
take
Alexia, maybe a female villain would be, or
right.
like Alex Wesker, who's fucking nuts in Revelations 2. Just have her be in a movie and be like this great mom all of a sudden, even though she fucking was like after Natalia and like crazy. So I looking at it in that way too, because I'm more familiar with Resident Evil. It's like that's very jarring and weird that they would choose to do that.
More I think about it, that might be my
Biggest
even
pet peeve
beyond.
of the
Yeah,
movie.
yeah, because Rose still serves the same purpose as Harry, so
Right,
that's
she's still done
fine. I
well,
still would have
exactly.
loved to have seen Harry, but the
Right,
change of Dahlia bothers me more. But I guess if
I
you
can
wanted
agree.
to get into the whole Rose Harry change, and there's other things within that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So the reason for, and I'll
You
speak
can't
very
even say it without
delicate. I'll
laughing.
speak very delicately about this. The
Okay.
reason why they changed Harry to Rose is because, and I don't know his exact quote, but the director Christoph Gans, who for the most part, he very great visual director. He
Yeah, he captured the feel of that.
understood most of the
Yeah.
game story and things like that, but
He nailed the
he
atmosphere,
said that
just
he
sucks to say.
changed the character. He changed the character because he said, you know, Harry's actions in the games and his portrayal or whatever. And I guess, I mean, maybe benefit of the doubt. I think Christoph Gans, like English is not his first language. He's actually like a French director.
His name sounds not American or
Yeah.
English or whatever.
So maybe benefit of the doubt. Maybe he wasn't explaining exactly right, but he said that he changed it because Harry's actions in the game. He's a woman. They're very feminine actions.
I,
And again, whatever, maybe that's not exactly what he meant, but that's what he said, more or less. And
right.
it just kind of comes down to what? So uh, it it's feminine for a father to want to protect and save his daughter?
Yeah, that's insane to me. And again, that might be
Literally go to
his.
hell and back?
Yeah, exactly. And again, like you said, that could be like I don't think at all like you're misquoting him or misrepresenting what he
Right.
said, but maybe he just like again he didn't mean it that way. But I don't know. I think like to suggest like it's weird because too like they always say like mothers and sons have like an unbreakable bond and fathers and daughters. I mean moms and daughters also do too. Whatever. It just depends on.
Yeah.
I guess I mean I'm extremely close to both of my parents, so for me like it's so funny to me to think like if I God forbid was missing and my dad had the opportunity to come search for me, I'm pretty sure he would do just as much work as my mother would to try to find me. Like that's just very it's very like I don't want to sound like I don't know. See, it's this whole part of it is kind of like a touchy thing because it can also be like perceived as like we're being like political or whatever in this, which I don't want to ever be when we're doing our horror podcast. Even though I've given
No.
certain opinions on certain things before in our podcast, I don't want to
Right.
get to. But like, I think for me personally, it's kind of like I don't want to really use the word insulting because I don't get like easily offended or insulted by things like that. But I think it's insulting to like fathers that
Right.
that that sort of mentality because it's like that's dumb. Like that makes no sense. Like that.
I know.
I mean, and I compared it to Joel. Like, look at, I mean, again, we've
Right.
come a long way since that movie came out or whatever. Like, The Last of Us came out years after that movie. But it's like, Joel is like a super popular video game character, and he's still like very masculine and like almost to like a brutal degree. Like, he's very tough
Hmm.
guy, brutal guy. And, he like lost his daughter and literally like cried with her in his arms because she, died. And then he has this whole relationship with Ellie, and he would do anything to get her back when she's, the fireflies want to scoop her brain out literally. So like I think that whole thing is very, very confusing to me, but I guess some
Yeah.
people think that maybe he never had a daughter, that director guy. I don't know. Or maybe it's a cultural
I
thing. I
don't
don't want
know.
to I don't want to offend anybody, but maybe it's like
Right.
the way he grew up. He just thinks that that's like a weak
And
thing for a
again,
man to be like. It's weird. I can't even try
yeah.
to explain.
Again, maybe we don't fully understand exactly what he meant, but it just that is
Yeah.
being, as far as I understand, why the change was made. Just uh, I don't
I mean, if he
understand
had
it.
said it more in that he wanted to explore more of a mother-daughter like relationship, I could understand that because mother-daughter
Sure.
relationships are different and unique than father-daughter. Like, I'm not like really different, but there's a different connection that you have with each parent, at least. Like, and again, I'm getting into like way deeper shit here, but like for me, I love both my parents the same. Shout out to my mom and dad if they ever watch our podcast. I love you guys, but they're both great, and I'm very fortunate that I'm close to both of them. But I definitely have a different relationship with both of them. Like, I can talk to my
Hmm.
mom a little more openly about things than my dad, and like, but then my
Right.
dad, like, I can bond over him with like video games and certain things more that my mom doesn't like. So there's always differences, but like that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that your parents don't. Like, I just don't understand that quote at all. I think it's, again, if he wanted to explore just like a mother, maybe if he explained it a little better, maybe it would make more sense to me. But like from just getting it from that type of quote, I'm just like, well, that's
Right.
kind of insulting and weird to like
I know.
fathers.
Right.
Like Rose isn't bad, but I guess we
Rose
can get
is
more into her.
fine. She
Yeah.
services fine, but on a more like nerdy sense, nothing to do with that. I did say to you, I think that it's just a shame that Resident Evil and Silent Hill, can't we get our characters leading the movie?
No,
Like, we
I
didn't
agree
get
with that.
Harry,
Yeah.
we didn't get any of our Resident Evil characters leading the movies. It's just, come on, they're
Yeah,
great
once
characters.
you put it in perspective like that too, I really started to like sympathize with Silent Hill fans more because I liked Harry a lot, and I think seeing him, and maybe because again I didn't grow up with the games, maybe the change with Rose wouldn't have bothered me as much as if it was like Jill Valentine was switched to a male, or
Mm,
something like that, or like Albert Wesker is going to be a female, even though there's
right.
Alex Wesker, whatever. But like it would probably bother me more if it was Resident Evil. I have like so many picky opinions, maybe, well, some people would say nitpicky opinions about that, but when you first told me that Harry was like a female, and like I was like, oh, okay, like that's kind of like weird, and I would have preferred to see Harry, but it didn't bother me until you told me what the director's explanation was for it. Then I was a little more bothered by it. But I think
Hmm.
overall I wasn't like very, but like after watching the movie, and even though Rose is good, her actress does well, she does serve her purpose. She's just like Harry from the game except female version, so she's fine. But I would have liked to see like live action Harry as well. Like going through the game with him, you go on this whole journey. It would have been really, really cool. And I think Sean Bean, that's his name. I don't know why I keep
Hmm.
like forgetting
Yeah.
people's names. He would have been perfect. Like they already cast him as her husband. Like he would have been such a cool, like a good Harry, because he even has like the hair, like like I feel like he could have
Yeah.
just played him so well. Like he looks like Harry when Harry's in like the live action cutscenes.
I agree. I know, I agree.
So
And
yeah.
they changed Harry to Rose, and
Right.
then the studio said there's no male characters in this movie. Like, you need to add somebody because they changed it to
Uh,
Rose. So then
mhm.
that led them to add her husband, Chris, and then the other cop.
Gucci. That's
But
so funny to me.
if you really think about it, their whole subplot is kind of unnecessary because they're kind of like the whole movie a step behind Rose and Sybil. They're going to where they just were in the real world and finding out kind of what you just found out, just maybe explained a little better. So that
Right.
whole spot is completely not really needed. And because it's added in unnecessarily, I feel it goes to also to the, we talked about this and we can get into the other aspect of it as well. I feel like as much as I do like the scenes where it juxtaposes Rose like next to the lockers and Harry next to the
Yeah,
lockers,
that scene was really cool.
that was great. As much as I like that, I feel like them being forced to add in Chris because there was no male characters
Mm.
made the isolation of Silent Hill feel less, because you kept bouncing
That's
out of
true.
it to the real world. Whereas in the
No,
game, you
that's true.
can't do that. You feel stuck.
No, I agree with that. You said that while we were watching, or not while, but like after we kind of talked a little bit about it, and you said that, and I was like, yeah, that's true, because you'd feel, again, like if you were playing through Silent Hill as Harry and it kept bouncing, into cutscenes of like somebody like looking for him in Silent Hill,
Right.
I
Yeah.
I think that would have taken you maybe not fully out of it, but like it would have made the, again, like, yeah, the isolation and you feeling super alone in this world, other than like, occasionally running into Sybil or whatever. I
Right.
think like it would have definitely taken you away from that. So I can agree with that completely. I liked
Again,
them as characters, both like Gucci was
yeah,
fine, and
yeah,
Christopher, but like I agree with that.
they weren't. I
They
don't
were
feel like they were
unnecessary.
ultimately needed. And again, I'll
Right.
say this very delicately, but I feel again the change of Harry to Rose was kind of a domino effect that led to my other changes, problems in the story. They
Yeah.
had Rose, they have Dahlia, so let's change Dahlia to make it about motherhood, which again is great, but that
Right.
changed Dahlia's character, and then they forced them to add in Chris, which fucked the isolation.
No, I agree with that. And again, as much as I didn't grow up with Silent Hill. I loved the shit out of the game playing it though. In 2020, after all these years, I've really, really enjoyed it. I think like the change would have bothered me more if I had grown up with the games. Like
Yeah,
Dina, the film den, we love her. We talk about her a lot.
and it
I'm sure
doesn't.
she had more issues with it, but
Yeah, it
it's
doesn't ruin the
still
movie for me. 'Cause I grew
no,
up
no,
with
no,
it,
yeah.
could still watch it and I enjoy it, but just thinking about it like this, it's like, man, this just. I wish I had seen this or whatever.
Right, and well, especially after like really realizing how much like Sean Bean could have portrayed Harry. Like he's a good actor and he looks so much like him. It's like, oh man, like that would have been cool.
I
Um,
know.
but even that whole thing aside, I think it's funny. I think I said this to you as we were watching it, and not in any sort of, you know, I don't know how to say. Again, I got to try to be delicate too because I'm less I'm more annoying than you are with my opinion sometimes, but like I don't want to be like annoying. But I don't want to
You're
say this as
fine.
like a well, I don't want to again, I hate using even this word and I hate bringing it up in our podcast. I don't want to like say this as like a I'm being a feminist statement, but I think it's very funny to me, and I am a female, obviously, but it's very funny to me how they felt the need to have those two characters brought in, like the whole Christopher storyline
Right.
and Gucci, because they were like, oh well, there's no guys in it, which is shouldn't that have been fine? I mean, 2006, that was like a while ago, so we've
Right.
come a lot farther with like that type of argument today, almost to a degree that I don't like, because now it's almost like you have to have females all over the place or then it's considered sexist, which is stupid. But again, that's an argument for a different day, and I'm not, and these are my own opinions, obviously, but I just think it's very funny that they felt the need to do that. Like, why couldn't it have just been a female like led cast? Like, because I think all the females, while I still would have definitely preferred to see Harry versus Rose,
Hmm.
I think all the females in this are done pretty well. Like, I mean, we talked about our issues with Dahlia, but as a the character in this, she's fine.
Yeah,
I
the
mean, I
version
wish
of
they didn't
her in
change her,
this
but
is fine, and I did
yeah,
say this
and
when
then
we talked
Sybil's
about her.
awesome.
So it was great. We did say this when we talked about Dahlia, but I feel like some of her line deliveries in this were very Dahlia-esque when she's like ranting and talking and
Yes,
weird.
yeah.
So
That's why at first that's why I think I was so shocked by the ending of her story, because she played Dahlia very well. She was saying all this like weird shit at first to Rose, and I was like, and I could even like even her face, like when her hair's all covering it, she had that kind of scary like look. They did change her look obviously from game to film, but I was like, oh, that's that's Dahlia, that's cool. But then when they changed her story, I was like, oh man, that's kind of weird. But I mean,
I know.
overall, like the whole point, to wrap up on that, it is funny to me that all the female characters are done pretty well in this, and then like they were just like, oh well, we need some dudes. Like I kind of don't
Hmm.
understand that.
Right.
Just from like especially for like horror, when like females like usually lead that
Right.
genre, which yeah, but
I
I don't know,
know.
it was weird.
Yeah. There was one other thing. You found it very weird. It took you out of it on the whole like isolation thing.
Hmm.
How in the game you run into a handful of people, but in this movie, Silent Hill is like packed with all of those cultists, and it takes away from the
Oh yeah,
isolation.
that was one of my biggest pet peeves, like things I did. I remember when the scene first started, it's like it's that girl Anna and she's going into like a church or whatever, and then all these people just start running in, and then Dahlia ends up there, and then I guess we'll talk about that cult leader. I don't even what was her name? Her name was actually really cool though. The
Christabella.
main, yeah, that sounds like a very culty name. I like that. But Yeah, when they were just all like when the siren went off and it was like Laura, I guess it was supposed to be calling like all these people to their like
You
culty
to
church or
get to the
whatever.
church where it's
But it was
safe, I guess.
weird. It was weird because there was like a shit ton of them just running in, and I was like, I thought Silent Hill was, but I think I even commented on it. I was like, why is there this many people in Silent Hill? Because even when you see Dahlia in the game, when you go into that room, I talked about this in the game podcast that we just did. When you walk into that room as Harry and you see like the ghostly figures of like
Yeah,
Dahlia, I think Kaufman's there, and like I think like two other people or something.
yeah, it
It's
might have
like
been like doctors or something.
yeah, it's like four people. That's it. Like doing like a ritual or talking, like doing something weird. But like in the movie, it was like it looked like there were hundreds of people just running
I
into the.
know,
And
I
I
know.
I didn't like that.
I don't either. I don't care much for the cult in this movie, and also if you remember, they change it. There's not they no they're not using Alessa to birth their god. They're burning Alessa because they think she's a witch because Dahlia won't tell them who her father is.
Which is very weird. Like very like
I know. What did they think? Her father's the devil or something?
just because well maybe in their weird culty like circle they don't believe in like out of wedlock or fatherless
I
children. But
guess, but that's
I
a.
think
I
that was the
mean,
point
I
they were.
think that
But
was
that's weird.
the flashbacks are supposed to be like the 1970s, and oh, this
Oh
single
yeah.
mother, she's a single mother, so let's burn her child. That's extreme.
That is very extreme. Like that would be something that may have happened like back in like the days where they were like,
I
"Oh,
feel
you're a
like
witch, let's burn you to the stake," but like
I
not.
know. I feel like that's what did you say? When I think you said it when you first saw some of the paintings with like the burning witches. What did you say it reminded you of?
Oh yeah, Parks and Recs like murals. That's so funny.
I know, and then I mentioned that there was one that literally was a
Was
witch
in the
burning in
70s.
the 1970s, and they're like burning a guy outside of a department store parking lot.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, when
Oh,
Leslie mentions it's the 70s, I remember cracking up because I was like, "Oh yeah, that would be something that would happen back in the day." Like I thought she meant like the 1800s or something. She's talking about fucking 1970.
well,
That's
that's funny
hilarious.
that in this movie it also was the 1970s that they burned her.
I mean, I guess it could be argued that they they're not like a full like society. They're just this crazy ass cult that they just want to end.
Yeah,
Like so it could be written off as that because I don't think in the 1970s it would be legal in a society to literally burn somebody alive. So I think that's just like the cult's mentality. And maybe was Dahlia like trying to join that their religion or cult or whatever
I
you want to
think she
say, and
was
that's
part of it. I think she was part of it.
okay. That's probably why then. It makes a little
Because
more sense when you think about it like
yeah,
that.
because Alessa was in the same uniform, and she was in that school, which I think was
Right.
supposed to be a Catholic, like not Catholic Christian, but that
Right.
cult, that
School.
religion's school, yeah. And then at one
Oh,
point,
okay.
I think Christabella calls Dahlia her sister, but referring as like a nun would say another nun is their sister. That's how
Oh,
I always saw
okay.
it. But
So I
yeah,
guess it
she
could make
was, and
more
then she was
sense
kind of like
that
exiled. That's why she was like how she was
okay,
later.
well then it makes a little tiny bit more sense now, but I still think it's a lot more complicated than it needs to be, especially in comparison to the games. The game already has a lot of layers and can be a little confusing on its own. Not again to the degree I said this in the game podcast as well, but not to the degree where I was like, oh fuck, this is too confusing to follow. I liked that it was like a big mystery and like you
Yeah,
kind of had to like really pay attention to things to fully gather the whole story. But in this, it's I thought like and the movie started off so strong and simple with like her walking through Silent Hill and the enemies and everything looked great, and then all of a sudden you get to this cult thing and I was starting to get like so confused and like wait what like is going on.
I know.
And
As like maybe complicated as it is, I feel like the cult motivation in the game is simpler. Because they're just like, let's burn this
yeah,
child to birth our
well
god.
and
Maybe
it's
they
more
thought
like
that was
realistic for
stupid,
like a cult.
or they
Yeah,
couldn't.
that's
Maybe they couldn't thought they couldn't portray it in the movie. I don't know.
there. I mean there could be a number of reasons as to why, but it could also be like you said earlier, they just wanted to do their own thing and separate the movie a little bit from the game, but like why
Right,
in
but
that way? And I think it's more believable for a cult to want to oh, you're gonna birth our god, so we need to sacrifice you type thing, versus like, oh, she doesn't have a dad, we don't know who he is, so let's just burn her alive. Like that's kind of, even though, like I said, I just rationalized it in my head. Like if Dahlia was part of this cult that doesn't believe in like, they don't go into this, at least I don't think they don't believe in like fatherless children. Maybe that's like
right.
one of their things. Maybe they're like so religious, obviously not Christian or Catholic or any real
No.
religion, but they're religious to whatever God they're super devoted to, and maybe that God
Yeah.
doesn't believe in being married out of wedlock. I mean, that is kind of like Christianity. No offense to people who are Catholicism. You're not even supposed to have sex before marriage in those religions. But so it work on those levels of like old fashioned religious people, like, oh,
Right.
she doesn't have a dad, so let's burn her. But then wouldn't they like in turn want to burn Dahlia because like she's the one that had sex
Uh,
without like a husband? I get, like, I don't know. It's very, very confusing.
you got me. I can't rationalize who he's called. It's just like they wanted to do their own thing, but you're still doing the whole Alessa slash Sharon or Cheryl thing, so you're kind of tied to the game thing, and like I don't know.
Yeah, and there were a lot more characters because there were so many extras, like all those people that are part of the cult, that it made it more like, I like how in Silent Hill in the game it's so simple. I mean, again, like I said, the story is very layered and you have to pay attention, but I like that there's only like you only run into certain people as Harry, which again I think helps on the isolation and atmosphere. Like you run into Sybil, you do run into Dahlia, obviously, and then everything starts to come together between Alessa and Cheryl and everything like that. And then there's obviously the Lisa thing, which isn't that relevant in the movie, and we'll talk about that. But I think it's so much simpler, like to have like hundreds upon hundreds of followers of this cult or religion or whatever. Also, well, it doesn't just take away from the isolation and atmosphere. It makes it way more like not really confusing because they don't really highlight any, but like just to have all these people just standing and you're just looking at all these different people, it's like, oh, okay, well, this is confusing. I don't know. Like it makes it
Right.
more convoluted and like conjumbled
Yeah.
to have all these people, and I don't like it. It's
I
way
don't
more
like it
simpler
either.
in the game.
Just a couple other things I wanted to talk about. I did like, just like the game kind of ended with Harry being drawn into like he like went into the elevator to go down to the depths of where the hospital.
Oh
In the
yeah.
movie, it was a hotel, or no, in the movie, it was still a hospital. It was just a different hospital from the games, which is fine. But
Oh yeah, I remember you
so they
telling
kind
me
of did
that.
the same thing, and then that's where they had the nurses, which are fine and really well done for what they are, but they're not. They're like Silent Hill
Oh,
2
Silent Hill
nurses,
2.
which it is what it is. We could quickly talk about Pyramid Head because
Yeah,
he's in
he's not
this.
in it a lot though, from what I
No,
remember.
he's in like a couple scenes, and I told you again he has a specific reason for being in Silent Hill 2, which you will learn when we are able to play Silent Hill 2. But
Right.
in the movie, they kind of imply that he's like Alessa's protector, created by Alessa or something, which is fine. It works for the movie.
Oh, okay, because I was gonna ask you if like if Pyramid Head, and I think maybe I asked you while we were watching, if he like symbolizes anybody in her real life that was trying to protect her, or
Not
if
that
he's literally
I,
just okay.
not that I know of. No,
So he's
but yeah.
just
So
somebody that once she had her power, she like created him to help,
yeah,
or
I think
okay.
something like that. Something like that. And again, it works for the purpose of this film, but he has no business to
Right.
be in here, and I can't wait
Oh
until
yeah, I remember you saying that.
you fully know why. But
It was cool though to see him in like a lot, because he's got such a cool, unique design. It
he's
was cool
done
to see
well,
him
yeah.
live action. Yeah, it's almost like we always compare them, and I think it's a very fair comparison because they're both extremely popular. I think like maybe the most popular creature of their respective series, but it's like Nemesis and Pyramid Head are like
Mm,
because when you think of like like when you think of a creature in Resident Evil, I feel like Nemesis would like pop in a lot of people's heads, and
yeah.
like Pyramid Head is the same way for Silent Hill. Because again,
Hmm.
I've never even played them, and I was aware who he
You
was.
know, yeah.
So I think if nothing else, it was super. Even if he like, and I'm sure I will share your sentiments completely when I play Silent Hill 2. I'm sure I'm gonna be like, oh, well, that makes sense why he shouldn't be in the movie then.
Right.
But if nothing else, it was so cool to see him in the live action movie because they did
I
him very
guess
well. All the creatures were done really well.
yeah, yeah, and they included some from other games as well. But
Yeah.
I guess I don't 100% have a problem with Pyramid Head being in the movie because he works for his own purpose in this. What I don't like is then later after the movie came out and they kind of brought things in from the movies to the games, the later games, then he starts to show up in the games again, where in that canon he has no business being there, and Konami
Okay,
is just kind
gotcha.
of milking his
Milking is popular.
popularity. Which,
Yeah,
to
but
their
like they
credit,
did.
Capcom never did Nemesis,
Oh,
really.
that's true. They've done it with other things though, like Leon. I love Leon, but they've done it a lot with certain other things. But yeah, that's true that they never brought Nemesis back because he would have because it. So is it? I guess I shouldn't ask while we're on a podcast, but I'm curious. Like, is Pyramid Head specific in the way that like obviously Nemesis has his purpose in 3 for being after Stars members, so he's only really necessary and needed when Stars are still around, like Jill and Brad and everything. So is like Pyramid Head like very specific to James's like backstory, I guess. Which again, I don't want to know why, obviously.
He's very specific to James, yes. He's
I know,
like,
I'm curious, like how he's such
right.
a
I
weirdly
know.
designed. Like I'm trying to think of how that could even work, but I guess I shouldn't even worry about it anyway. So I play the game.
Yeah, so nobody answer that in the comments in case Brandi stumbles upon the comments at some point, because she
I
is
know.
blind to
I
the rest
won't
of the
look.
games. So I guess the only other thing I wanted to talk, well, I don't care much for how they took out Sybil, and I know you didn't either.
Oh, I was so pissed. I thought at first though she was gonna die when she pulled the thing out of the elevator and sent Rose by herself, and she was just getting like fucking punched by like the I
Right.
guess they were the cult members. They had the gas masks
Hmm.
on at that point, but they're like supposed to be the cult members, right? That are like following them or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I thought she was gonna die there, and then when I saw her alive, I was hoping that she would survive the movie and they would get like the quote unquote good ending like we did in the game. But
Hmm.
of course, they fucking killed her, and they killed her in such a way I was just like, oh my god, they literally like burnt her, and that's
They
terrible.
burned her
Like what a
alive. I
bad way
know.
for a good character to go out. But
I know. Yeah, like I've said, and you just alluded to, she can die in the games, but yeah, I
yeah,
don't know. I didn't care much for how she was taken out, and at least she was taken out at all. So,
well, and I was kind of hoping again. I went into this movie completely blind, and once Sybil was I said Sybil. Once Sybil was established, and I realized she was really well done, I was
mhm.
hoping that we would get like the amusement park type scene, and like she would end up being like
Right,
infected
I
or
would have
whatever.
loved to have seen the amusement park in this movie.
Yeah, and that would have been so creepy and cool and well done if they were like on the carousel. Like I would have loved to seen like the replica of the game where like when you're on the carousel it's Harry and you have to either kill Sybil or splash that fucking magic shit on her that you and I did. I mean, it would have been cool.
Aglaphotis.
Yeah,
Right.
that's her. I would
Oh,
never have
remember in the
remembered
game we
that.
didn't mention that either, but remember we found Ouroboros in the game.
Oh my god, that's so great. I remember when I picked it up and I was like, Ouroboros. You just started laughing. But no, I would have loved to have seen like the amusement park in the because they did go to several like iconic Silent Hill locations. I know that they changed the hospital to like I think you said the one in the second game, which is fine.
Mhm.
But they went to like the elementary school and it was Midwich and that was cool. And just even like going down certain alleyways where you can see all like the garages and stuff. Like it
Yeah.
looked legit. It looked like the games. So I would have loved to have seen the amusement park, which I thought was a really interesting. We didn't talk about this in the game one because we were just talking about so many different things and I should have mentioned that the amusement park while annoying because I got super lost for like 20 minutes trying to find my way because you don't have a map to it. I thought it was really really cool to see like the rides. It's just a very like I guess some people could say cliche like location for like horror, but I cuz like the rides but I love the way they did it in Silent Hill with all the and you're in like the rusty world so like the ground's all
Mhm.
grady and rusty. So that was a really cool location and I was hoping to see that in the movie and I was really hoping that Sybil because she was done so well and was very close to her game counterpart. I was like, oh, that'd be cool. Is she gonna get like infected and Rose is gonna have to shoot
Right.
her? Or like I was
I
just hoping they
guess
would have done something else with her than what ended up happening. She just gets like
I
captured,
know.
tied up, and then burnt. And it's like
Yeah.
that's
I guess because they have different nurses, they're not like the parasite controlled nurses, and because we didn't really have Lisa, so that whole subplot was also cut out. But I guess on that, do you want to talk about Lisa or the lack thereof in this movie?
yeah. Once she was in, I mean, I figured she wouldn't be as big because when she was finally introduced at all in the movie, it was like towards the end. But I
Right.
was just hoping that like she would have something more of significance. But it's just like, I mean, at least she's there at all, I guess is.
She's
But
there
like,
as like an Easter egg or fan service. She's
yeah,
honestly, I
fan
don't know,
service.
I didn't tell you this, but she's honestly not even credited as Lisa. She's credited as Red Nurse, like as what she was wearing.
That's
But it's
that's
clearly supposed to
shameful.
be Lisa.
Right, and I said it in the game one, and I will say it again. Lisa, for whatever reason, I named several weird reasons in our game one, but she like was my favorite character. I think it was
Yeah,
the
which is really
mystery of
cool.
her bizarre and like fucked up backstory, the parallels to Judy Garland, which I've always found like such like it's just crazy because like Judy Garland's story has always been one of like my top ones that I follow. Like I watch every documentary I can on her. I've watched like biopics. Like I love that story because I don't love it. That's terrible. It saddens me but it's like interesting to me. And so for her to have that parallel, maybe that's why I love her. Of course, I said it before. I probably explained it terribly, but she's also very pretty and like and feminine, and I liked that about her.
Hmm.
I liked James. Wow, I never even played the second one. And I'm calling him James. I liked Harry's protective like thing he develops for her in the games. I liked everything about her in the games. And then I like too how you like I love that nothing was revealed right away. Like they were really good at holding back and waiting until like certain points to reveal things. So at first I was very confused by her, but there was just something immediately that like drew me to her character. And
Right.
I really liked her. And then it got even more so when I found out all the fucked up shit she went through. So I think like again, her being my favorite in the game, and then just but Sybil was like one of my other favorites, and she was done so well that I was hoping that
Yeah,
if Lisa was in the movie at all, she would be done well. And it just kind of sucks. It was kind of just like an anticlimactic. It's like, oh, there she is. Oh, she's bleeding and she's dead already. And I was like,
I
what?
know, I know.
No.
It's just Lisa's story, and again, maybe they thought it was unnecessary or complicated, but I always thought her story was so deep and tragic and messed up in the games that it would have been great to see that translated into the movies.
No, I agree completely. I think, I guess that because they didn't even have Kaufman, so I guess the whole
No.
drug, and maybe they thought the drug thing was like unnecessary, but I think it just, again, added a layer to it. Might not be a horror related type, but then again, see, Silent Hill is good at dealing with like serious issues because we didn't even mention this when we were talking about all the adult themes of the game and everything, but like it dealt with even like drug addiction. Like
Hmm.
that's kind of crazy again for a
Yeah.
game that came out in 99 to be like so ahead of its time to tackle things like that. And it's unfortunate that the whole subplot was cut from the movie. I guess it doesn't necessarily need to be there, but I liked it and I think it added to the story
But it
and
makes
like the
it makes the
creepiness.
story deeper. Whereas,
Yeah.
again, I enjoy this movie and I always enjoy it when I watch it, but it's
Yeah.
definitely like the story is definitely flatter than the game.
No, I can agree with that because it doesn't have that extra oomph. I guess, like,
Mm.
I feel like some people could argue, like I said, Lisa's story doesn't absolutely have to be there for the game, like, because, the story's about Alessa, Dahlia, and Harry and Cheryl, but I think it also added not only to the drama and the darkness of the, like, layers, but, like, it also, like, it's really adds to, like, the eeriness because the fact that she doesn't know that she's dead and when she realizes it, she just, like, starts bleeding, like,
Hmm.
that's really cool and creepy. And the fact that she's like trapped, seemingly, I guess, trapped in like the rusty like dark
The
world or
other world,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, like that's like really fucked up and cool. And like the more I think about it, and I think the more I even play the game, I'll fully understand and realize why I find her so interesting. Because again, it's hard for me on my first playthrough or watch through of a movie to sometimes figure out why I'm so attached to a character. Like sometimes I still even think about some Resident Evil
But
characters. I'm like, why do I like her so much? Like Excella, I just fucking love her. But
right.
like she's so I think with Lisa, like the obvious things are that the mystery of her, the fucked up story and everything, but like I think also like the scary thing about her story is that it's scary and tragic. Like it's both
Hmm.
sad and creepy. Is like not realizing that she's like one of those nurses. It's so creepy.
I know, I know. See, and you know what? That's it's again, I love it so much, and it's so awesome that you've played the game once, you've seen the movie once, yet these games are so deep, and that you are finding so much in it to like talk about. And,
I
like,
know. I was like, see, I'm rambling as much as if it was a Resident Evil
I
one, because
know.
like, but I guess that is good. It shows how effective the story and the lore and everything. Like, there's so much to talk about and so many layers to explore in the games. Again, I'll probably even pick up on more things, not even just with Lisa, but as the game as a whole when I play,
Hmm.
because I'm definitely gonna play it New Game Plus because unfortunately I
Hmm.
don't have Silent Hill 2 right now. We're trying to work on that, but until then, I definitely want to go through the game again
Yeah.
and
I
pick
mean,
up on
speaking
things
of
I
Silent
hadn't
Hill
before.
2, believe it or not, that's story is deeper than Silent Hill 1.
Oh, then I'll probably really like. And you say it's a little more simpler to follow because it's not very cult. It doesn't really
Yeah.
have anything to do with the cult or whatever. It's just
No.
more
And I don't mind telling you
tragic
that
stuff.
because that's something that's like not. It's not like I'm telling you what is in it.
Right. No, I still have no. I would be going into James's story completely blind, other than I know he's looking for his wife, and Pyramid
Mhm.
Head is like his monster or somebody that appears a
Mhm.
lot, and that's kind of interesting. I have no idea why though.
So yeah,
We're getting
hope.
sidetracked, but I just wanted to. I had to shout out and talk about my girl Lisa again for a little bit because I do
Yeah.
hate that she was sidelined in the movies. I think you're right. I think she was only probably in there to sort of like be a nod to the game and fans would be like, oh, there's Lisa, but it does suck that she
Mhm.
was sort of downplayed because I think she was one of or like to me, in my personal opinion, the most interesting character in the game. Even if she didn't have
I
to do
know.
with the
I
forefront
think.
story, I loved her.
I think her story is arguably like just as complex as Alessa's. Maybe not just
Yeah,
as, but very close.
because she also had to take care of Alessa when Alessa was
Yeah.
all like
Hmm.
burned and that's in both the movie and the game, right? Like, is
Yeah.
that why she's even introduced in the movie at all? Is because she took care of Alessa when she was all black
Yeah.
and
I
burnt.
think. I think so. Yeah.
But like, did Kaufman like force her to take the drugs or did she like take them willingly to try to get her mind off of like this traumatic thing that's happening with this little girl, and then she just got hooked on him. Like I that's the only thing I think you explained it to me, but I'm just like
I
curious
think
about that.
I think he got her hooked on the drug and then kept
Like feeding them to her.
using them against her. Like, you have to keep taking care of this
Oh,
child, or you're not gonna
gotcha.
get this. That's
See,
why I
her
sort of
story's filled with so much like tragedy, and that's why it's so interesting to me that it has those parallels to Judy
and
Garland. That's
I
very
think
dark.
I think I've seen this somewhere too. Also, that like she maybe the reason why she didn't realize that she was the same as those nurses is because she was like because of the drug.
Yes, which is so interesting. The whole thing with her is very interesting. So, I want to play through the game again and try to pick up on other things. Like I said, not even just with her, just in general, but I think her story is very it interested me from the beginning. I don't I like I said, even when we first met her, I was just kind of drawn to her type of character. I don't know why, but
Yeah,
it's interesting. So I
it
don't
is
know. She's
very
definitely my favorite, and it sucks she
yeah
wasn't fully explored in the movie as she could have been. I think if they hadn't changed things so drastically and they just kind of followed the exact story from the game, she could have been in it, and
yeah.
it would have been so sweet to see like a live action Harry and like his concern for, because they probably would have explored that a little more. I would have honestly loved, because I didn't see any type of like love thing between them. I'm not saying that. Whereas in like
No,
Resident Evil, my mind runs wild and I'm like, they're in
I
love.
think
But with this game, it was just like I felt like he was like
I always
Harry was
felt
just like a nice guy, and he was like possessing like fatherly almost feelings for her,
yeah, I
or
always
just
felt that he was protective over Lisa and Sybil to some extent because he lost his wife. So he like found Lisa.
oh,
Lisa's
or
this
that,
helpful. She's this
yeah.
helpless like girl, and part of
And
him
he
like
relates it to his wife. That's
yeah,
interesting. No, that's true too. I always thought of like the daughter thing, because it's like, oh, he has a daughter. Maybe that's why he feels for like these female
right,
characters. But that's even deeper, that he has a daughter that he's taking care of, and his wife passed away. So see, again, that's why changing him to a female and having the husband not be dead but he's alive and looking for her does take away from that whole dynamic as well, whereas like I feel like Harry does that's wow, I never even thought about that. See, look how deep it is. Like that's a really cool thing to think, is like he is, even, yeah, like you said, to some degree even very protective over Sybil, even though she's very capable
hmm
and she's a cop and she can take care of herself. He does seem like, whenever he runs into her, like, are you okay type thing, which I
yeah,
love the concern, and that might be because of his wife, like you said. That's very cool.
yeah.
See, I like that.
The only thing else we're going to talk about, which we don't really have to go into too much on, is like the ending,
The
which
ending.
changed it and made Alessa more vengeful, and like
Oh yeah,
she
yeah.
used Rose to get into the church. All the barbed wires, like fucking, just
Oh
skewered
yeah, killed that
everybody and got
bitch.
her revenge. Killed everybody in there in the church except for Rose, Sharon, and Dahlia.
So I guess it could show that she's not hateful in that she wants to kill everybody and she's just going on a path of destruction. She just wants like revenge on the ones that
Against the cult,
hurt
yeah, the
her,
one that
which
did that
makes
to her.
sense, and I don't mind a character like that. But yeah, I didn't see her like that in the game at all. Like, even though yeah, I didn't even see her wanting like revenge on Dahlia. She just seemed like this innocent girl that just got
Right.
fucked over, and she just wanted out of it all. And
I
it's
mean,
like, but
Dark
in the
Alessa
movie,
definitely is a thing in the game, but I don't feel like they took it to the
right.
extreme that they did in this
See, every
movie.
time you say that, it reminds me of Dark Natalia. I need to stop thinking of Resident Evil. Natalia's awesome though. But
And then the movie, I guess, ended. It ended similarly to the game, where Dark Alessa merged with Sharon,
oh yeah, and then they went
and
home,
then
right?
they
And
went home, but they were still trapped in the fog world somehow because they were at their house. Then it
but it was
showed
foggy, and
Chris like in the house, and like they weren't together and whatever. And then it ended. It was very ambiguous.
no, it was. I remember being kind of confused at first, because I was like, wait, are they still trapped? I think that's kind of interesting though, in a way, because it's like they're literally back at their home, but there's still the fog everywhere, and he's in the house, but he can't see them, and like they're in different.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think that's kind of cool, but it is kind of weird. Also, I just have to say this real quick, because we didn't mention this. The movie, we did mention how beautifully shot the movie is, with like the wide shots of like her walking through Silent Hill with all the fog and everything. But I think it's cool too. We said this whenever it would go. This was probably one of the only good things about it, kind of jumping back and forth between like the dad's perspective and then Rose in Silent Hill, is like the remember how we were pointing out like the colors and how much they popped in the scenes with like
Yeah.
the dad, like how it's
Hmm.
almost like the what's it called, like saturation on certain colors were
Yeah.
like was like upped even more, because like when you go to Silent Hill, everything's just gray and or like a bluish gray and like dark, and like then obviously when you go into like the Rusty world, it's like all red and rusty and scary, and then when you jump to like the dad in the real world, like the actual real world, it's like
bright and
There would be like a
colorful.
truck. Yeah, there was like a truck in one scene that was just very, very blue and like eye catching, and then at a certain point there was like a red car or something. Like there's certain things, and I was just like, oh, that's really cool. Like they obviously probably did that on purpose to contrast between the two worlds, which I really, really liked.
Yeah,
And
no,
that
I
happened
think
in that ending scene too, when it was all foggy for Alessa, Cheryl, whatever, and
Rose.
Rose. It was all that blue, huge, misty
Hmm.
fog again, and then when it would jump to him in the house, everything was very like bright and like
Yeah.
stark. I like that.
No, yeah, this movie definitely is, I feel like, one of the it's one of the like most, I don't know if beautiful is the right word, but beautifully shot movies I've ever seen. I guess that's the Silent Hill the movie. Um Again, you know, I enjoy it. I like it. The changes bother me more and more because I just
Mm,
it's like what could have been. Um
right. I can
but
understand that.
but I'm very glad that we were able to both play the game and watch the movie, and we got two podcasts out of it. And I just love that. Again, it speaks to the game, and again, how much you enjoyed it, just how much we had to talk about both of them, even though it's brand new to
I
you.
know. I know a lot of the time when we show each other things, like the other person that's showing the person will usually, if not always, usually we can get a good conversation going, but a lot of the time it's like we
Hmm.
will ask the other person questions, and I know you did ask me a few, but like for the most part, I was able to just ramble fast as I usually do. But I like that because again, this game was very, very good. I wish I had grown up with them. I would have more, probably even a connection to them, and the nostalgia factor would be awesome. And then I probably would own the other games, so we wouldn't be fucking stuck right now. We probably would be playing them instead of doing the podcast. No, I know
Yeah.
we wanted to do this, but I'm very intrigued now with the whole world of Silent Hill. Obviously Resident Evil is like my child, and I will always, always love Resident Evil as my number one survival horror series.
Hmm.
Obviously, I don't even probably need to mention that that's an obvious thing, and
But
I've
I
always loved the
think,
characters. But
but I think, just this first exposure to it, can you see now why it was like always, think about survival horror. Most people think Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Can you see now why like it's put up there with it?
no, definitely. Especially because I've never played any other one, so people are probably gonna be like, well, I guess you never know till you play them. But I have seen other PS1 era survival horror games played, like
Mm.
on YouTube and stuff of people I follow, and I know why Resident Evil and Silent Hill stood the test of time and why they stand out amongst games back then. I know a lot of people also like Dino Crisis. I've never played them. I've seen bits and pieces, but I think and that was Capcom, and that was very similar to Resident Evil, except for what people always like say, it's the Resident Evil basically, except for with dinosaurs. But I think Silent Hill and Resident Evil were both just so unique and just so ahead of their time. Specifically, Silent Hill with its really, really deep story, which I loved because again. I love, don't get me wrong, again, I don't want to keep saying I'm like downplaying Resident Evil because I know people won't think that because everybody knows how much of a Resident Evil fucking whore I am. My name is fucking Mrs. Billy Cohen right now on Twitter, for God's sake. So, but I think Resident Evil has its own thing, and it's always had a like campy element to it, which I think works for the zombie thing and everything. And then you have you like on the flip side of that, you go and play Silent Hill, and of course it has little quirky moments like that, like we were talking about with some of the dialogue and stuff. But that's just like I think like because it's a victim of its time type thing. The
Hmm.
story though is so compelling and just so different. The story of Resident Evil is compelling too, but in a completely different way. Like I mean, the characters are so interesting and you love them right away in Resident Evil. I feel like you want to see Jill Valentine survive and Chris Redfield and everything. But I think in Silent Hill it's different in that you just want to know what the fuck is going on. And then once you start to get through all that, you're like, holy shit, they tackled like so many things that again I don't think were ever talked about at that time in video games, at least. Like
Yeah.
I always thought like the first real deep video game was just so sad and funny. I'm sure there's also hundreds of others out there I've never played, but I always felt like the first deep video game for me was like, oh, like, maybe like Telltale's The Walking Dead or like
Right.
The Last of Us, which only came out in the last like what, like 8
10
years or whatever.
years.
For me, I feel like Silent Hill was definitely ahead of its time in terms of the
Hmm.
stuff that it chose to like tackle, like the real life, especially like there's the child abuse, there's drug addiction, there's like I mean loss, like him losing his wife, and then like
Hmm.
fucking burning a child alive. I know I talked about child abuse, sorry, that's, then like even in the movie when they brought in like the sort of like sexual abuse sort of like implications. Like it's just all very, and then you even said that maybe that's a theme that comes through in the games later on. It's all very, very, very interesting to me because I love story and I love character, and I feel like Resident Evil might be more character driven because it has reoccurring characters that are so iconic at this point, whereas I feel like Silent
Right.
Hill may be more story driven, which is fine. That's a good thing too. I
I
That's
think
my whole final thoughts. I really liked it, and I want to try to play the other ones if I hopefully I can.
no, hopefully it's gonna happen, even if it takes a year.
I know.
But yes, so yeah, so that's our final thoughts on the movies and the game,
Yeah.
and hopefully sooner rather than later we'll be here talking about Silent Hill 2. I'm gonna, I'm
Yes, I
gonna,
hope. I pray.
I'm gonna,
I think.
I'm gonna make sure that happens one way or the other. Um,
Yeah, I shouldn't
and
say
there's
hope. I should say I know instead
there's
of hope.
that, and then hopefully also in the future, once we, which that'll be way in the future, once we watch play the game that one's based off of, we can talk about on the podcast Silent Hill Revelation 3D, the
Oh, is that the
trash
other
sequel.
movie? Oh man.
That'll be fun.
Wait, is there a Silent Hill Revelations game, or is that just what the
No,
movie's
that's
called?
just what the
Oh,
movie's
okay.
called.
I was like, okay.
No, Revelation and everything. There was Resident Evil Revelations, Assassin's Creed Revelation, Silent Hill Revelations. It was just a very popular word at one point in video games.
I know. Well, that's why I asked you, because two best friends said that one time they were playing Resident Evil Revelations, and they were like, "There's so many Revelations going on. There's Silent Hill Revelation," and so that's why I thought it was a game, but I guess they meant the
No,
movie. But that's
no.
funny.